As a current theology master's student at Baylor University, I'm going to be breaking down why your ministry isn't growing as much as you think it should be. I don't think most pastors are burned out because ministry is hard. I think they're burned out because they're trying to play a game and win a game that God never asked them to play. And so I used to ask the question that sounds pretty holy, but it's actually killing people. And this is the question: how am I doing? And I'll be honest, I don't know about y'all, but I sometimes didn't want the honest answer because the answer I wanted was numbers for my ministry, attendance, conversions, growth. I know y'all can relate to me right now. But one day there was a sentence that I found that just changed everything for me. Faithful and nothing comes from it. Faithful and nothing comes from it. And so today I'm going to be showing y'all the biblical metric that actually evaluates ministry without crushing you. And if you're in ministry if you're in ministry or even just like a Christian trying to live faithfully, this might change the way that you measure not only your ministry, but your life as well. And so by the end of this video, you'll be able to answer three things. How do I evaluate ministry without worshiping success, right? Those conversions, those numbers, that growth. How do I avoid using faithfulness as an excuse for incompetence and laziness? And what does Jesus actually mean when he says, bear much fruit? Because if you've ever felt that pressure to perform for God, I want to reassure you, you are not alone. And if you've ever judged yourself or other leaders by the numbers, I get it too. I've been there as well. Once we step into ministry, it's very natural to ask, like, how am I doing? How will I know how well I'm doing? And our modern answer that we've placed on ourselves nowadays is, oh, it's by success, right? It's by the end results of, oh, how many people were there on Sundays? How many got baptized and converted? And if your church is growing, conversions, right, numbers and all these things, people say, oh, then your ministry is effective then, right? Why do we see more of this right now? Let's answer that question first. Because modern culture has really just eroded loyalty to institutions and communities as well. So people instead become these spiritual consumers. They stay as long as the worship just feels like attractive to them, it's like trendy, and it's what people like nowadays in our generation. And so that by default creates a reward system. If you can create powerful, religious experiences and draw crowds with that personal appeal, then you're crowned as being effective, right? But there's danger in that. Success becomes a scoreboard that disciples the pastor more than the scriptures do. So then there's a reaction that we see as well. People say, oh, the only true criterion is faithfulness. Sound doctrine, godly character, right? Faithful preaching, discipling the right way. And there's truth there, right? Massive truth. But the backlash to that can also become an oversimplification because sometimes faithfulness becomes a shield that keeps you from the hard questions. And we're going to get into those, and they're actually really interesting, and they're going to cause some discomfort. So I invite you to keep watching. Here's the shift that we see. A more biblical theme than either success or faithfulness is fruitfulness. If you're taking notes, write down that word at the center of your page, and we're going to branch from that. Fruitfulness. Jesus doesn't just say, oh, come and be faithful. He also says to bear much fruit, right? Jesus. John 15. Paul is even more specific. We see in the Bible. He calls conversions fruit. He calls the character transformation fruit of the Spirit. And he calls deeds of mercy and service fruit. So fruitfulness isn't just attendance and these numbers. It's people actually being changed. It's the gospel producing visible outcomes in love, in life, in community. And so let me tell you the moment that where like this really hit me, and it messed me up, but like in a good way. Okay, I'm going to explain that. There's this quote from Charles Spurgeon, just a very impactful man in Christian thought and religion as a whole. You should look him up if you don't know who he is. It's a quote that he says. It's a framework that he has that was just, when I first saw it, it was kind of terrifying, funny, terrifying. It just made me feel like a bunch of stuff. He describes this type of group of men that have like enormous passion and zeal, men who can like talk forever. but in his words, a conspicuous absence of brains, right? It's these men that can just go on and on and on. They can stump and thump the Bible and absolutely nothing comes out of it. And Spurgeon, he says something that like it should really make us think, whether you're a minister, a Christian believer, whatever you are. He's not mocking them. We have to understand that. He's actually like he has affection for them. He understands them. They're sincere people. They're earnest. They're laboring, but then comes like that punch in the gut. But then nothing comes out of it at all. When these men teach, there's little learning being done. When they evangelize, there's little converting being done. And Spurgeon even goes so far as to like deny their applications, because these men would write to them and want to talk to him and be part of his ministry and stuff like that. And this kind of shook me, because it forces us to ask the questions and see the framework that we don't like, which is this. And I want you to write this down as well if you're taking notes. Can I still be sincere and yet still be ineffective? Ooh, I know that hit some of y'all. It hit me. Can I be faithful and still yet not really help anyone grow? That's the tension. See, if you only use faithfulness as your metric, you might never ask if your ministry actually produces fruit. That's the main thing. Is your ministry, you as the pastor, you as the layperson, you as the elder, are you making sure that you or your ministry is actually producing fruit, or are y'all just trying to be faithful? There's a difference. We're gonna keep diving into that. Paul gives us a metaphor that kind of solves and helps this whole debate. He calls the congregation God's field, like a area of land, his field, God's field. Some plant, some water, some reap. See that in 1 Corinthians? And that gardening image, I really like it because it refuses two extremes. A gardener can do everything right and still face factors that are beyond his control. The weather matters, meaning God's sovereign spirit. The soil also matters, meaning the hardness of heart that varies among people. People have different levels of this hardness of heart. So if you demand this guaranteed like numerical outcome, you're asking for divine control that you simply don't have. And that pressure can crush not only a minister, but any leader in any capacity. But gardening also rejects the excuse game that we like to have. A gardener has to be faithful, but also skillful. And so if you're faithful but incompetent, your garden will more times than not fail. So fruitfulness instead holds you accountable, but it doesn't demand that you play God. So when fruitfulness is what you go off of, it's your criterion, you're not crushed by the expectations that a certain number of lives must change dramatically. But you're also not allowed to ignore the fruit, you're also not allowed to ignore the hard realities when faithful work bears little fruit. Y'all see that? So here's where it gets personal, and I want to share this story that I heard from Tim Keller, which is also like, look him up. If you don't know who these men are, look him up. Also just a very impactful man in just Christian thought and religion as a whole. So this is a story, a framework that he shares that I think is super important. After years of ministry, he moved more into teaching, preaching, leadership, evangelism, the doctrine of the church. And for the first time, he says that he had space to reflect. And then in 1889, he moved to New York City to begin what is now known as Redeemer Presbyterian Church, which is a super large, impactful church in the New York City area. And then after a few years of starting this church and seeing it really, grow and produce fruit, pastors from around the world came and were like, Tim, like, what in the world are you doing, my brother? Like, why are you growing so much? Like, you have to have this like secret sauce or something. And the weird thing was like, they didn't come and ask him for like theology or like, what are you preaching on Sundays that I'm not? Like, what is it, man? Like, tell us the secret. And a lot of them left disappointed because they didn't receive what they thought they were going to receive from Tim Keller. Because at first glance, Redeemer Church, it seemed like traditional. They weren't doing the trendy things that people associate like with my generation that would capture our attention. And yet, there was thousands of people that were my age in this church with their attentions fully captured by Tim Keller and his leadership and just the church as a whole. Some thought it was the preaching style. Some thought that it was like the classical music they would do in the morning and the jazz music they would do at night, which is pretty interesting as forms of worship. I never heard that myself personally of a church doing that. I think that's pretty cool. But Tim Keller, we said no, like it's not what I say on Sundays. It's not the illustrations I use or the analogies I use of social of secular media and secular culture, because he does like to do that. It's not the music that I do. It's not the classical music and the jazz music at night. So then pastors were like, what in the world is it? And this is what Tim would say. The real issue, or what y'all are looking for, isn't style. Like, we're not doing anything different in the form of style. When you understand people's hearts and culture so deeply that it forces, that they feel the force of the sermon's reasoning, even if they still disagree, there's a difference there. That's where the impact is. So the secret, a lot of these pastors found out, wasn't programs, it was deeper than that. And so coming back to me now, this is how this just framework changed everything for me. Most ministers like to think in two layers. Number one, doctrine, what we believe, and practice, what we do. But there's a missing layer that's in the middle of both of these. And when you ignore it, you start gluing on, these popular methods from the outside, and methods that don't fit your theology or your culture, or sometimes both, which is you just got a bad deal right there. And then you come back and you wonder, well, why is there no fruit? Like, why are we not growing? Why are we not having baptisms? Why is no one converting, right? So I want you to think about it like this. If you're taking notes, I really invite you to write this down. And if you aren't taking notes, start taking notes right now. Think of doctrine like hardware. Think of your ministry programs like software. But then there's also something in between called middleware. Okay? Hardware, software, in between, middleware. Middleware is the layer that actually helps the hardware and the software work coherently or work together. And so in ministry terms, it is between the doctrinal beliefs, and the ministry practices that there should be a theological vision. Okay? So doctrinal beliefs, which is the hardware, the ministry practices, which is the software, and the theological vision, which is the middleware. So what is a theological vision? This is the root of everything right here. Do not miss this. A theological vision is more practical than just raw doctrine, but more theological than step-by-step techniques. It's the space where you can reflect deeply on the gospel and your particular cultural setting. What is around you? Where are you? We're going to dive into some questions that's going to help you decipher that. So stick around for that. And it's when you do this that your ministry can naturally grow out of both of these. This part is huge. Don't miss this. Before choosing your methods, you have to ask, how do our doctrinal beliefs relate to the modern world? And that reflection is what forms the middle part, like we just said, that theological vision or that middleware. And so here's the key concept, the key idea. God doesn't speak in volumes. He tends to speak in and through people, in and through history. And because God's speech is addressed through centuries of different cultures and times and histories, it's often just misunderstood and misinterpreted. So fruitfulness can fail when we refuse to do the work of discernment, paying attention to what is around us. And so we have to ask, where does culture need to be challenged and where can we affirm it? Because this answer shapes everything that you and your ministry is going to do, from preaching, discipleship, evangelism, leading, serving, you name it, it's in that list. And so here's the list of questions that I need you to ask if you want to decipher what your theological vision or middleware is. Starting with the first one. What is the gospel and how do we bring it to bear on hearts today? Number two, what is the culture like around us and how do we connect to it? How do we challenge it? Number three, where are we located? Like physically, are we in a city? Are we in a suburb? Are we in a small town? And how does that shape our ministry? How does that change how we do ministry? Next, how involved should Christians be in civic life and cultural production? Next, how do word and deed ministries relate? Next, how innovative should we be and how traditional should we be? Next, How will we relate to other churches in the city as well? And next, how will we make our case? This is super important. How will we make our case as a person, as a church, as a ministry? How will we make our case to the culture around us about the truth of Christianity? If you are not able to sit down with your leadership team or just you and answer one by one these questions about your ministry, about your life, about your church, then you're going to be like those pastors from around the world that were visiting Presbyterian Redeemer Church with Tim Keller or Tim Keller's church, and you're just going to leave confused because you're looking for these methods, these, oh, well, if we do this type of music instead of this music, then our church will grow. Oh, if pastor dresses more cool with his flannel and his tight jeans and his white Converse, then we're going to attract more of the younger people. Listen, I'm not against these methods, but if you don't understand the middleware, the theological vision, if you cannot answer one by one these questions with your pastor, with your ministry, for your life, are you really going to produce fruit? Or are you just doing faithful work? So here's what I want you to do this week. I don't want you to do a program. I want you to do a process. I want you to write down 3 columns. After you answer these questions, I want you to write down, or it can be either way you want to start what I'm about to say or the questions. You have to do both. But I want you to write down 3 columns. Number 1, doctrine, which is the hardware. What do we believe? Culture. What are the people around us like? What do they love? What do they fear? What do they trust? And then the vision, the middleware. How does the gospel confront and heal those loves, those fears, those likes and dislikes that we discovered about our culture? Then, and only then, can you choose the software or the methods. What are you going to change? What are you going to implement? What are you going to add, take away in your church or your ministry or in your personal life as well? Because when you reverse it and you try to start instead with the methods, you will always chase someone else's fruit. We'll catch you on the next one.